Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Ryan Hale returned home after a quiet 3-day trip, he didn't expect to find his private beach transformed into a wild, unauthorized beach party. DJ booths, jet skis, and HOA banners had invaded his land, and what started as trespassing was about to ignite an all-out war. I was only gone for 3 days. Just a quick trip upstate to inspect a seawall retrofit for a former colleague. Nothing fancy, just routine work. But as I turned down the final stretch of the quiet coastal road leading to my house, something immediately felt off. I spotted parked cars lining both shoulders, spilling onto the grass and shoulders like some overcrowded beach festival. SUV trunks were open, beach chairs sticking out, coolers half unloaded, people laughing like they were on vacation. Except this wasn't a resort, this was my damn property. As I crept closer in my truck, the full scene came into view, and my blood pressure went straight through the windshield. My private beach, the one that's been in my family since 1957, looked like it had been invaded by a budget Burning Man. There were 2 massive white tents, a full DJ booth set up on a wooden riser, inflatable bounce castles wobbling in the wind, and at least 80 people dancing, drinking, and grilling like it was the 4th of July. And there, flapping limply in the sea breeze above the tents, were HOA banners. Blue Gulf Shores. Welcome to the Shore Summer Kickoff. I pulled into my driveway, barely, and parked at an angle just to avoid a pair of teenagers unloading a box of plastic cups and a keg. I got out and stared, stunned. Someone had removed the private property no trespassing signs from the gateposts. My motion sensor camera by the dunes, torn clean off and lying face down in the sand. The security flagstones I embedded to mark the edge of my parcel were trampled and pushed aside like someone had dragged picnic tables over them. But the worst part? On the shallows, right near the designated turtle nesting zones, clearly marked with state-provided signs and cordon stakes, 3 teenage boys were tearing around on jet skis. One of them skimmed within 10 feet of a nesting mound. I watched a gull scatter and a wave smack against the fragile sand like a hammer to eggshells. I took a slow breath, trying not to blow a gasket. I pulled out my phone, opened the security system logs, and stared at the number of perimeter breaches. 57, all within the past 24 hours. My land had been violated more times than a junkyard chain-link fence. I called the county sheriff's non-emergency number, gave them my name, explained the situation, and politely requested immediate police assistance for trespass and potential environmental violations. The dispatcher told me an officer would be out shortly. 15 minutes later, a patrol car pulled in behind my truck. The officer, late 30s, maybe early 40s, leaned against his door like he was showing up to a backyard barbecue. I handed him my folder, copies of my deed, tax records, a printed map with property lines, and a copy of a court ruling from 2003 that explicitly excluded my land from the HOA's jurisdiction. He nodded, skimmed it all. Then he looked out over the crowd and winced. Yeah, this is a lot of people. Look, Mr. Hale, I see your paperwork, and I don't doubt what you're saying, but going in there now might cause panic. Could turn ugly real quick. My face twitched. So, you're just going to let them keep trespassing? I'm not saying that, he replied, but it'd be better if you filed a formal complaint through the court. We can act then. Right now, it's complicated. Complicated. That's what they call it when your rights aren't worth enforcing if there's too many people in flip-flops. I stared at him, then turned back toward the beach, where some guy I'd never seen before was setting up what looked like a margarita station directly on top of my buried fiber cable. The officer gave me a polite nod, told me to keep records and stay civil, and then got in his car and drove away, leaving me standing in the driveway like a forgotten sentry watching my land being turned into a beach club. I walked back to my house slowly, boots crunching against someone else's sand trail. I wasn't going to file a complaint. I was going to file a damn war. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the noise. The music finally died down around midnight, but because I couldn't stop replaying the officer's face in my head. That polite shrug. That "what do you want me to do" smirk as he got back in his car and left me to deal with a beach invasion like it was a neighborhood bake sale gone long. By morning, I was pacing my living room with a mug of cold coffee and a folder full of legal documents, trying to decide whether I should raise hell in person or let a lawyer steamroll them. The folder won. But first, I needed to get some footage. I threw on my boots, grabbed my phone, and marched straight toward the beach, ready to document every square foot of stupidity that had landed itself on my land. I hit record before I even got through the side gate. The scene was somehow worse in daylight. Beer cans half buried in the sand, charcoal embers still glowing in illegal fire pits. One of the bounce houses had deflated overnight and lay like a giant sad jellyfish across what used to be a native dune cluster. The damage to the nesting area, obvious. The signs had been trampled, the rope stakes pulled up, and one mound, an actual nesting site, had tire tracks cutting right across it. I scanned the beach for her, and there she was, seated on a folding recliner shaded by a custom blue Gulf Shores HOA canopy, like she was queen of a seaside colony. Karen Tenvik, 50-something, sharp features, bright white visor, and that HOA name tag, like it meant she carried divine authority. She saw me coming and barely moved, just smiled, raised her cocktail glass, and said, "Well, good morning, sunshine. Back from your rich person retreat." I didn't return the smile. "You're on my land, Karen." She gave a mock gasp. "Oh no. Are you going to chase me off with a pitchfork? Ryan, don't be dramatic. You've got a little beach. Let people enjoy it. We're celebrating community. You've torn down my cameras. My fencing is damaged. You've got motorized vehicles near federally protected species. There are minors drinking, and half this trash is going to wash out to sea. You think this is a party?" She shrugged. "It's Florida. Everyone has a beach. Not everyone owns the land under it." She waved that away like I was reciting conspiracy theories. "I have the HOA parcel plan right here," she said, reaching into her beach bag and pulling out a crumpled sheet of paper. She held it up like it was Moses' tablet. "It was unanimously agreed during last week's committee meeting that this beach is to be used for seasonal events. For morale." I stepped forward and took the page from her hands. It was a typed memo signed by her and two other names I didn't recognize, with vague statements about Eastern Beach community access and celebratory allocations. It didn't name the parcel, didn't include coordinates, didn't reference my lot. Number, nothing. "This isn't a legal document," I said. "It's a community resolution," she said coolly, "and the community supports it." "No, Karen, the law doesn't care about your imaginary parliament. This is trespassing. This is destruction of private property. This," I gestured to the flattened dunes and kids playing football on the turtle nests, "is going to get someone prosecuted." "You wouldn't dare," she said, her tone sharpening. "You think the HOA is scared of one angry landowner with a bunch of dusty old paperwork? That beach was a gift of nature. You can't fence in the ocean." "I don't have to fence the ocean, just the land up to it." "Well," she said, rising from her chair and brushing invisible sand off her legs, "maybe it's time you realize that hoarding coastline in this economy isn't a good look. This is about equality." That was the moment I realized. She didn't think she was trespassing. She thought she was liberating something. I turned away, phone still recording, and walked back toward the house. I had what I needed: video, audio, photos, proof of both destruction and refusal to cease. She thought I was bluffing, that she was protected by the HOA's mythic authority. She'd just declared war on the wrong beachfront. By the time I got back to the house, I'd already uploaded every video clip to a secure cloud folder, emailed copies to myself, and texted them to my attorney, Elaine Marshall. Elaine had been my go-to ever since I inherited the property, a real pitbull when it came to land rights and coastal zoning. She called me back less than 5 minutes after I hit send. "Jesus Christ, Ryan," she said. "They turned your property into a Margaritaville crime scene. Glad you're as horrified as I am. More, actually. Those jet skis near the nesting zone. That's a federal violation. You still have your exclusion ruling from 2003. I've got 3 copies. One's laminated." "Good. I'm putting together an emergency injunction request. If the judge's clerk isn't out fishing, we might have something in hand by this afternoon." She hung up, and I immediately called the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. When I explained that endangered sea turtle nests were being trampled by unsupervised watercraft on my private property, they didn't even blink. Within 20 minutes, I had a call from a field agent who said a team was being dispatched. I stood on my back porch, watching another set of teenagers carry folding chairs past the damaged fencing like they owned the place, and thought, "All right, Karen, let's see how you like real oversight." Elaine worked fast. Less than 2 hours later, she called back and said the judge had reviewed the evidence: video, maps, my affidavit, everything. The result? A temporary restraining order against the Blue Gulf Shores HOA and any of its members from occupying or utilizing my property in any way. Enforcement authorized immediately. I printed 4 copies of the order and folded them into a plastic sleeve. Just as I was stepping off the porch, I saw a pair of FWC vehicles pull into the driveway, one black SUV with government plates, and a trailer hauling a dune buggy with a siren. The agents were all business. They walked the beach with me, documenting the nesting area, photographing tire tracks, disturbed mounds, and the clear signs of human traffic in restricted zones. One of them took soil samples while another logged GPS coordinates with a state-issued tablet. Then came the kicker. They spotted an unlicensed food vendor grilling near the dunes. He didn't even try to hide, just shrugged and offered them a hot dog. They took his name and ID, took photos of his grill, then confiscated his portable cooler for potential evidence. He looked genuinely shocked. I almost laughed. As we wrapped up, I spotted one of Karen's banner signs still standing tall near the volleyball net someone had jammed into the dune line. "Welcome to the shore" in bold blue letters. I took it down myself and stuffed it into the garbage can with a certain amount of satisfaction. When the lead agent handed me their preliminary report, it read like a federal indictment. Documented environmental damage, violation of nesting site protections, potential misdemeanor citations under state wildlife law, and a recommendation for enforcement coordination with local law enforcement. I smiled for the first time in 24 hours. "This enough?" I asked. The agent didn't blink. "You'll want to get the sheriff back out here with this in hand. If they don't act this time, they're opening themselves up to liability." "Good," I said, and turned back toward the house, the printed order in one hand, the FWC report in the other. Let's give the HOA something to celebrate. I didn't call the sheriff's department this time. I drove there. I wanted to hand that court order over personally. I wanted them to see the seal, the signature, the urgency stamped into the margins. And I wanted them to know that if they didn't act now, there would be no maybe later to hide behind. The law was on my side, and I wasn't going to be polite about it anymore. I walked in, handed the paperwork to the duty officer at the front desk, and gave him the short version: court order, verified property rights, environmental violations, and a damn illegal beach festival organized by a woman with a god complex and zero legal ground to stand on. The officer looked through it, eyebrows rising steadily. "You want us to move in?" "No," I said. "I want you to enforce the law." Within 40 minutes, 2 patrol units were en route to my property. I called Elaine to keep her in the loop. She just said, "Film everything." When I returned home, I parked across the street, stayed low, and waited. Sure enough, I saw the patrol cars ease in, lights on, but sirens off. Seconds later, 2 large black wildlife enforcement trucks followed behind. One of them was towing a trailer with 2 empty cradles, jet ski impound units. Things were about to get loud. I followed them onto my property on foot, just as the first patrol officer walked up to a group of people near the grill setup and told them to step back and cease all activity. The reaction was instant. Confusion, raised voices. Someone shouted, "We're allowed to be here," and another said, "Karen said it was approved." Karen naturally emerged from behind a drink station like she'd been expecting a standing ovation. She was wearing a flowy white blouse now, a sun hat too large for her head, and an expression of pure entitlement. "What's going on?" she demanded, waving a paper napkin like it was a badge. The lead officer didn't bother with small talk. "Ma'am, are you in charge of this gathering?" "I'm the president of the HOA," she said proudly. "Do you have permits for this event? Landowner permission, liquor license, environmental clearance?" Karen opened her mouth to speak, then stopped. She glanced over her shoulder like she was hoping someone else would jump in. No one did. Someone nearby quietly folded up a beach chair. "I have a resolution from the HOA board," she offered weakly. "We voted." The officer blinked. "You voted to take over private land?" "It's part of the community. Ryan Hale has been hoarding it for years. This is a gesture of unity." He held up the court order. "This is a restraining order issued by a circuit court judge. That land belongs to Mr. Hale, and this gathering is unauthorized. We are now in enforcement mode. You are instructed to disperse the crowd immediately." "Enforcement?" she said, voice rising. "You can't do this. We're just celebrating. You're trespassing, and depending on what our friends from Fish and Wildlife report, you're also interfering with a federally protected species." That's when the chaos started. People began packing up quickly like rats abandoning a sinking barge. The music was cut off mid-track. 2 officers went straight for the jet skis, flagged down the teenagers, and ordered them off the water. One of the kids tried to argue until the wildlife officer pointed out the endangered nesting signs and explained that tampering with a habitat could carry jail time. That got his attention. One by one, the jet skis were dragged onto the sand, engines shut off, hulls inspected, then lifted onto the impound cradles. The bounce houses were deflated, folded like body bags. The fire pits were shoveled out. The banners were taken down. It looked like a crime scene cleanup crossed with a failed music festival. Karen tried to rally a few people. Don't let them intimidate you. We have rights too. But no one was buying it anymore. They'd seen the uniforms, the badges, the printed court order with her name on it. By the time the sun dipped low and the last cooler was confiscated, the beach looked like a battlefield. Except now, the rightful owner was standing in the middle of it, court order in one hand, camera in the other, and not 1 ounce of sympathy for the queen of HOA revolution. I thought that would be the end of it. That once the tents were down and the jet skis hauled off and Karen's dream of communal beachfront utopia was lying in a heap of deflated plastic, we could all just go back to living like civilized neighbors. But no. Because Karen doesn't do quiet humiliation, she does escalation. It started the very next morning. I was standing on the porch, coffee in hand, looking out at the stretch of sand that had finally returned to looking like mine again, when a county code enforcement truck pulled into my driveway. 2 men stepped out, clipboards in hand, neon vests, that bureaucratic look of just doing my job plastered on their faces. One of them approached and said, "Mr. Hale, we received a complaint about unpermitted fencing and possible shoreline encroachment. Mind if we take a look around?" I blinked. "Are you kidding me?" He shrugged. "Anonymous report. Standard procedure." I didn't need a name to guess where that complaint came from. Karen must have filed it the minute she got back to her porch, probably still drunk off boxed sangria and fury. I walked them around the perimeter and showed them every permit, every inspection tag, the coordinates from the cadastral map laminated and nailed to the stone post. They took notes, nodded, and eventually said there was nothing to cite. But the fact that they'd been dispatched at all on my own damn property was like a mosquito bite on a sunburn. Later that afternoon, a delivery truck arrived. The driver hopped out, looked around, then asked, "Is this 209 Seagrass Lane?" "Yeah. I've got 6 beach umbrellas, 3 portable grills, and 2 tables from Partico Rentals. Someone paid cash. Dropping it here. It took me 10 minutes to get them to take it all back. Another hour to get confirmation that the order came with the sender name, Blue Gulf Welcome Committee. No number, no contact info, just more games. The real kicker came that evening, though. I was on my back deck scrolling through local news when I saw the headline, "Neighborhood Beach Party Ends in Legal Chaos. Residents outraged by landowners' aggression." The article quoted community sources who described the event as a peaceful gathering disrupted by heavy-handed enforcement and claimed I had threatened teenagers and used police intimidation tactics. One quote, suspiciously anonymous, accused me of violently yelling at children. They didn't name Karen, but the tone had. Her fingerprints all over it. She'd gone on a sympathy offensive, painting herself as the matriarch of an oppressed HOA trying to bring people together, while I was the villain hoarding sand like a dragon with a beachfront hoard. I called Elaine. "They're setting up a PR war," I said. She sighed. Karen knows she's in deep legally, so now she's trying to make this about emotion and community. It's textbook HOA spin. Can we respond? Not yet. Let them keep digging the hole. But document everything. Every delivery, every call, every weepy neighbor who knocks on your door asking why you hate the ocean. She was right. Over the next 2 days, I had 2 different people from the HOA come by and check in, pretending they were worried about how I was feeling after the incident. One of them offered me a pie. The other asked if I'd consider reopening a dialogue about shoreline use agreements. I said no and shut the door, but I could feel it shifting. Karen wasn't retreating. She was regrouping. And she was going to fight me in every way short of actually setting my house on fire. I knew Karen wasn't stupid, just entitled, theatrical, and catastrophically overconfident. She didn't believe she'd done anything wrong. In her mind, she was still saving the people from a tyrant with a deed. But I underestimated how far she was willing to go. 3 days after the article ran, I got a knock at the door. I was expecting another HOA busybody, maybe with a casserole and a guilt trip. Instead, I opened the door to find a man in a sport coat and wireframe glasses holding a leather briefcase and a clipboard. Mr. Ryan Hale? Yeah. You've been served. He handed me a thick envelope, nodded politely, and walked off without another word. I stared at the envelope for a second before tearing it open. Inside was a notice of civil mediation request. The HOA was suing me. The claim? Unlawful obstruction of community access to coastal recreation area and intentional interference with communal morale building activities. I laughed out loud. They were literally suing me for making them leave my property. I sent the whole thing to Elaine, who called me almost immediately. This isn't going to hold, she said. It's performative. They want to trigger a legal back and forth and exhaust you. It's pressure, not precedent, but I could feel it. Karen was trying to get me to flinch, to settle, to concede something, anything that could be spun into a win for her side. So I didn't flinch. I countersued. Elaine filed the paperwork within 48 hours. Trespassing, property damage, environmental violations, defamation, harassment. I wasn't interested in playing defense. I was dragging them to the same courtroom they thought would scare me. The HOA's legal rep was a guy named Davis Turley, a local lawyer who'd represented them in small disputes, noise complaints, tree trimming, lawn violations. He wasn't built for this kind of battle. At the preliminary hearing, he tried to argue that the beach felt communal because it had been functionally accessed for years by residents. The judge raised an eyebrow and asked him if he was suggesting feelings overruled land deeds. Elaine handed over the property map, the exclusion clause from the 2003 court ruling, and a written statement from the FWC officer confirming that the nesting damage alone could have triggered federal charges if I hadn't intervened. The judge didn't throw out their claim, yet, but ordered both parties to present full documentation in advance of a formal hearing. That gave us time, but also meant more exposure. Karen was still working the social angle. New articles popped up. Posts on the HOA forum appeared suggesting I had a history of aggression, referencing a noise complaint from 5 years ago that involved a malfunctioning generator during a hurricane. I found a flyer posted to the HOA bulletin board calling me the beach tyrant of Seagrass Lane. It featured a cartoon of me standing over a sandcastle while crying children watched from a fence. I took a photo of it and emailed it to Elaine with the subject line, "You can't make this shit up." She responded, "Good. The more ridiculous they get, the easier they are to crush." But the stress was mounting. I started waking up at night thinking I heard people on the beach again. I checked the cameras obsessively. I had sandbag-level anxiety every time a delivery truck slowed near my driveway. Still, I knew one thing. If Karen wanted a legal war, I was now fully committed to finishing it. The date of the hearing was set for mid-May, and in the weeks leading up to it, the neighborhood began to feel like occupied territory. People stopped making eye contact at the mailbox. Some waved like nothing had happened. Others turned their backs entirely. Karen, meanwhile, strutted around like a peacock in war paint. She held HOA community update meetings on her front lawn with folding chairs and lemonade, spinning the story like I was a rogue land baron trying to privatize public joy. It might have been funny if it hadn't been so effective. A few parents I'd known for years suddenly started pulling their kids inside when I walked by. One guy I used to fish with crossed the street rather than say hello, but I wasn't about to back down. Elaine and I had everything lined up: the original land deed, the 2003 exclusion ruling, the photographic evidence of damage, and a deposition from the FWC agent confirming the endangered nest site disruption. Still, she warned me, courts don't like neighborhood drama. Stay sharp, stay calm, and don't take the bait. Karen showed up to court with Davis Turley in tow, wearing a blouse that looked like it had been ironed with rage. Her expression said she expected to be vindicated on the spot. Davis looked like he regretted every decision that led him to that courtroom. The judge, a tired-looking man named Kenneth Maynard, opened the hearing by asking for a summary. Davis started in with a 10-minute speech about community cohesion, historic coastal access, and intentional isolationism on the part of Mr. Hale. Elaine waited until he was done, then stood and handed over a binder 2 inches thick. This is the deed. This is the court's own prior ruling affirming that Mr. Hale's property lies fully outside the HOA jurisdiction. This, she said, flipping a page, is photographic evidence of property damage and environmental violation by event attendees. And here, she handed the judge a separate envelope, is the official statement from Florida Fish and Wildlife regarding the destruction of a federally protected nesting site. The judge read in silence for a moment, then looked up. Ms. Tenvik, did your organization obtain any permits for the event held on Mr. Hale's property? Karen stood, hands folded, voice calm. Your Honor, the community was under the impression that the beachfront was an open-use space. The judge raised a brow. You received a court ruling in 2003 that says otherwise. That was years ago, she said, with a soft smile. Things have changed. The community has evolved. The judge tapped his pen. The law hasn't. Elaine leaned toward me and whispered, he's not buying it. Karen's tone started to shift. Less grace, more grit. She claimed I had never posted clear signage, that the property line was debatable, and that the residents had accessed the beach peacefully for years. Elaine calmly pulled out the time-stamped photographs of the signs I'd posted, every single one. Of them dated, geotagged, and even backed up by my security system logs. The footage showed them being torn down by people in HOA t-shirts. The courtroom was quiet as the judge reviewed it all. Then he leaned back. Ms. Tenvik, what you're describing is not ambiguity. It is trespassing compounded by environmental damage and the unauthorized organization of a mass gathering on private land. Karen opened her mouth, then shut it. Even Davis didn't try to argue. The judge ordered the full trial to proceed in 2 weeks and stated that preliminary findings supported the plaintiff's claims. That meant me. Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Outside the courtroom, she tried one last jab. You're making enemies, Ryan. You don't win neighbors back with lawsuits. I looked her in the eye. I'm not here to win them back. I'm here to win. 2 days after the hearing, the subpoenas started going out. Elaine wasn't playing defense anymore. She was building a wrecking ball. With the judge's statement on record and discovery now fully underway, she filed motions to compel disclosure from the HOA board, internal emails, meeting minutes, financial records related to the event, and any communications referencing my property. Turns out HOA Karen had left quite a digital trail. Within a week, we had email exchanges between Karen and her inner circle. One message, dated a full month before the party, read, if Ryan Hale wants to wall off Paradise, maybe we just stop asking for permission. Another email instructed the treasurer to allocate funds for event rentals on the beach near Lot 12. Hale's parcel with the note, don't need his sign-off, just do it. That was gold. It proved intent, not confusion, not neighborly optimism, intentional, coordinated trespass. Elaine added it to our evidence packet and prepared our witness list. We brought in the FWC agent who had documented the environmental violations, a property surveyor who reaffirmed the parcel lines, and even the rental company rep who confirmed Karen herself had signed for the tents and sound system. But while our side was tightening up, things were coming apart across the street. HOA members were furious. Apparently, Karen hadn't told anyone about the lawsuit she filed against me until the hearing became public. The HOA's legal budget was draining fast, and some residents were shocked to learn it was being spent defending her personal stunt. A small group of them showed up at my door, not with torches and pitchforks, but with red faces and apologies. We didn't vote for this, one guy said. We thought it was a potluck. Now we're paying for her crusade. Another woman, a retired teacher, handed me a letter. This is a notarized statement. I saw her order the speakers and sign the rental agreement herself. I thought she had your permission. Elaine nearly cheered when I told her. That's witness testimony from a neighbor. Destroys her whole narrative. And then came the cherry on top. One of the jet ski renters, just a kid, maybe 20, turned state's witness after he got hit with a fine from FWC. He showed us a group chat where Karen encouraged them to stay near the sand. They can't enforce anything down there. She'd promised they'd have protection from any trouble and told them the beach technically wasn't owned by anyone. That blew up any defense she had left. Karen wasn't just arrogant. She was reckless, manipulative, and now thoroughly exposed. Elaine looked at me across her office table and said, we're not just going to win. We're going to bury her. By the end of the week, we submitted an updated complaint, not just civil trespass and property damage, but now seeking punitive damages for willful malice and negligent endangerment of a protected environment. The judge reviewed it and set a firm trial date for early June. And Karen, she doubled down, sent a neighborhood flyer titled, They Want to Take Away Our Shoreline, written like a call to arms. But this time, nobody rallied. Her support was crumbling, her board members jumping ship, her voice echoing in an increasingly empty hall. The trial began on a Tuesday morning under a flat gray sky that matched the mood in the courthouse. I arrived early, dressed like I gave a damn, with 3 copies of every document in my satchel and Elaine beside me like a legal missile primed to fire. Karen showed up late. She wore a shawl, oversized sunglasses, and the same smugness she'd clung to through the entire storm. Her lawyer, Davis Turley, looked like he hadn't slept in days, and from the look of his battered briefcase, he hadn't prepped for what Elaine was about to unleash. Opening statements were simple. Elaine laid out the facts: private property, confirmed jurisdictional boundaries, repeated violations, willful damage, reckless endangerment of a protected coastal habitat, and a campaign of harassment carried out under the guise of community. Spirit. Turley tried to paint me as a recluse, a curmudgeon with a vendetta against the HOA. He argued that Karen acted with a desire to foster inclusion, and that the beach had long been informally accessed by the community. That was a mistake. Elaine stood, held up the 2003 exclusion ruling, and said, "This is formal, this is legal, and this." She walked to the bench and presented the emails, the rental contracts, and the FWC documentation is premeditated, reckless abuse of someone else's land. The courtroom got very quiet. Witness after witness took the stand. The FWC agent testified first. He walked the jury through the environmental impact, how multiple sea turtle nests were trampled by beachgoers, how jet skis in shallow water posed direct threats to hatchlings, and how the property was marked and logged in state records as a sensitive zone. Then came the neighbor, the retired teacher. She confirmed that Karen had misled residents, signed for the equipment herself, and never once mentioned that I had refused permission. We were told it was a neighborhood event. I didn't know we were trespassing. Elaine called the delivery driver next, and he flatly testified that the tents and grills were placed past the stone markers, which he assumed were there to block wind. Then came the kid who rode the jet ski. He was nervous, but admitted Karen told him, "Don't worry about rules, it's all HOA property." Finally, we brought in the surveyor. He re-established my property line with exact coordinates and explained, in painful detail, how HOA jurisdiction stops 2 full lots away. Karen tried to fight back during her own testimony. She talked about the spirit of togetherness, the historic nature of the beach, and accused me of sowing division. Elaine stood up, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "Did you or did you not sign this rental agreement?" Karen hesitated. "I don't recall." "You don't recall a contract with your name on it?" I was acting on behalf of the board, the same board that voted to allocate funds for a party on land they don't own, after being told specifically that the land was private, marked, and protected under environmental law. Karen went silent. The judge looked at her, then at Davis, then at the stack of evidence on his desk. "I'll deliver a formal ruling tomorrow," he said. "But let me be clear, this case isn't about community values. It's about basic respect for the law and private property." We walked out of that courtroom into a blast of humid Florida air. I didn't smile, not yet, but I could feel it coming. That night, a patrol car pulled into Karen's driveway. Apparently, an internal review had been opened into the first officer who ignored my original complaint. Turns out, he'd dismissed multiple similar property calls in the past and had been written up for dereliction before. By morning, his name was no longer listed on the Sheriff's Department website. Word was he'd been let go, quietly but officially. The ruling came just after noon. I sat in the second row of the courtroom, palms pressed together, not praying, just holding back the urge to lean forward and stare down every single person who ever said I was overreacting. Elaine was stone-faced beside me, notes organized, hair perfect like she'd already read the verdict and was just waiting for the curtain to drop. Judge Maynard took his seat, glanced at the courtroom, and then spoke in that flat, precise tone that meant there'd be no theatrics. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Hale." Karen didn't flinch. Maybe she thought if she didn't move, it wasn't real. "The defendant, Blue Gulf Shores HOA, is hereby ordered to pay $120,000 in compensatory damages for trespass, property damage, and administrative costs related to the environmental violations. Additionally, Ms. Karen Tenvik is held personally liable for $50,000 in fines and will receive 9 months probation with mandatory community service, with the explicit condition that she may not serve in any official capacity on a neighborhood governance board for the duration of that term. There were a few gasps behind me. Karen's jaw tightened. Her lawyer just dropped his pen and let it roll off the table. The judge wasn't done. Furthermore, the court issues an injunction against Blue Gulf Shores HOA. Effective immediately, the HOA is barred from initiating any event, policy, or action concerning properties outside its formal jurisdiction, including but not limited to Mr. Hale's parcel without notarized and voluntary agreement from the affected landowner. Boom. It was done. Legal wall. HOA lockdown. Karen's sandbox was now fenced in with legal razor wire. Afterward, I shook hands with Elaine. She didn't smile until we were outside. "You know," she said, "they'll probably try to appeal." I laughed. "Let 'em. I'll frame the next ruling." The fallout was almost instant. Within 2 weeks, nearly a third of the HOA membership submitted official withdrawal notices. The next meeting was sparsely attended, and Karen's seat sat conspicuously empty. She'd stepped down from the board. Rumor was she tried to rally for re-election, but the probation clause killed that fantasy. HOA finances took a dive. The new treasurer issued a full breakdown to members showing how much had been spent on Karen's personal crusade. Spoiler alert, it was more than what they'd spent on road maintenance the entire previous year. I, meanwhile, rebuilt. The beach was cleared, resurveyed, and posted with new signs. Real ones, metal, bolted into concrete. I even installed a couple of motion sensor floodlights and a third camera tower. The environmental crew helped restore the nesting areas, and I donated to their fund in appreciation. One afternoon, I was walking the perimeter when I found someone had stuck a laminated card in the sand by the old party site. It read, "Private property trespassers will be prosecuted again." I didn't put it there. Someone else did. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe the universe. I left it exactly where it was.